For 40 straight years, one army seemed, well, unstoppable. They conquered pretty much everything from Korea to Hungary. They were, without a doubt, the most feared military force on the entire planet. But on one single day, they walked straight into a brilliant trap that would shatter their myth of invincibility forever. Let's break down exactly how this masterclass in military strategy actually went down.
Okay, so picture this. The scene is set. It's September 3rd, 1260, out on the dusty plains of Palestine. You've got a massive Mongol army, 20,000 strong, thundering towards this little spring called Ain Jalut. And they are feeling good, supremely confident. Cairo is next on the list, and after that, who knows? The world. But they are about to face an enemy completely unlike any they've ever fought before.
And this really is the central question, isn't it? How in the world do you defeat an enemy whose reputation alone is so terrifying that entire cities just surrender? An army that hasn't had a single major defeat in 40 decades? Well, you sure don't meet them head on. No way. You have to outthink them. To really get the scale of what's about to happen, we first have to understand the Mongols. I mean, this wasn't just another army. This was more like a force of nature that had completely reshaped the known world. For 40 years, think about that, 40 years. Ever since Genghis Khan first united the tribes, the Mongol Empire had known nothing but expansion. Their momentum seemed absolute, like their victory was just preordained. And this created a psychological dominance that was every bit as powerful as their military might. And if you break down their dominance, you see it wasn't just brute force. Oh no. It was a highly sophisticated system. They were masters of psychological warfare, making surrender seem like the only logical choice. Their command structure, this decimal system, it was genius. It organized warriors into groups of 10, 100, and 1,000, which allowed for incredible coordination on the battlefield. And every single warrior was a master horse archer, basically a mobile artillery platform. Their strategy sent a brutally simple message, one they demonstrated with horrific clarity at Baghdad in 1258. You resist, your city will literally cease to exist. Every man, woman, and child gone. You submit immediately, well, you might be spared. This terror, it was their most effective weapon, hands down. But riding out to meet this unstoppable force was a completely different kind of army, one that was forged in a totally unique and, frankly, brutal system. So let's meet the Mamluks. Now, the Mamluks were not conscripts or your average feudal knights. They were, by definition, warrior slaves. They were purchased as young boys, usually from the Eurasian steppe, and they were raised for one and only one purpose, to be the perfect cavalrymen. Their entire lives, from as young as 7, were dedicated to mastering the art of war on horseback. And this created this fascinating clash of military philosophies. You see, the Mongols were generalists. They were masters of speed and terror, totally dominant in the open field. The Mamluks, on the other hand, were specialists. They were a precision instrument, a scalpel designed to dominate other cavalry in the brutal, messy chaos of close-quarters combat. Now, the Mamluks knew they couldn't beat the Mongols at their own game. The numbers were against them, history was against them. But they had an advantage, an ace up their sleeve, a commander who had actually studied his enemy. The Mamluk commander, a guy named Baibars, had a really unique advantage. He'd actually seen the Mongols in action during their campaigns in Syria. He watched their patterns, he learned their preferences, and he saw their greatest strength. That relentless, unstoppable pursuit of a fleeing enemy was also their single greatest weakness. It made them predictable. And so he developed this elegant, beautiful 4-step plan. First, he chose the battlefield very carefully. A valley with hills, terrain that would totally break up the Mongols' perfect formations. Second, he would stage the most convincing fake retreat in history to lure them in. Third, he'd use their own doctrine of relentless pursuit against them. And finally, when they were stretched thin and vulnerable, he would spring the trap. So, the stage was set. But this wasn't just going to be a fight. It was going to be a masterful deception, a performance on which the fate of an entire civilization rested. So as dawn breaks, the Mongol commander, Kipuka, sees exactly what he wants to see, a small, tempting Mamluk force. Then, Baibars begins his feigned retreat. This is the performance of a lifetime. He has to look desperate, but still organized enough to be a convincing target. For hours, he draws the Mongols deeper and deeper into the valley, stretching their perfect formations until they're thin and disorganized. By noon, Kitbuka has committed everything. His entire army is now inside the valley, their attention totally fixed forward, focused on what they think is a crumbling enemy. They are exactly where Baibars wants them to be. They've walked right into the cage. He saw a fleeing enemy. He saw victory within his grasp. But what did he not see? What was hidden, waiting in absolute silence, just over those hills? 9,000 fresh Mamluk heavy cavalry, commanded by the Sultan Qautuz himself, erupting from concealment on both flanks. The trap was sprung, and in one single moment, the Mongol hunters became the hunted. And this is where the Mamluks' unique, specialized training paid off in a huge way. The Mongols' coordinated archery and their open-field tactics, completely useless in this chaotic, compressed melee. The Mamluks, with their heavier armor, their superior swordsmanship, and their horses trained for the shock of combat, just systematically dismantled the disoriented Mongol warriors. The second the Mongol commander Kitbuka fell, Mongol resistance just collapsed. The survivors who fled didn't just carry news of a defeat, they carried news of the impossible. The myth of Mongol invincibility was dead. And this chart, wow, it shows the impact with stark clarity. For 40 years, the Mongol Empire expands relentlessly. And then, 1260, the Battle of Ain Jalut. The expansion hits a brick wall. It comes to a sudden and permanent halt. The war machine that had rolled from the Pacific to the Mediterranean had finally been stopped. Now, the Mongols had faced setbacks before, but there was always an excuse. A typhoon in Japan, political turmoil back home. Ain Jalut was different. There were no excuses. The weather was perfect, their command was unified, they were simply out-generaled and outfought. And the consequences of this were truly global. Their westward expansion stopped cold. Right across the Islamic world, cities that had submitted to Mongol rule suddenly rose up in rebellion. Without that unifying myth of invincibility, the Mongol Empire itself began to fracture. And all the way over in Europe, kings breathed a massive collective sigh of relief. The terror was over. And it all leads to this one final powerful thought. Ain Jalut was a victory of strategy over brute strength, of intelligence over raw momentum. It proves that no power is invincible, and it leaves us with a pretty powerful question. What happens when a commander stops fighting the enemy's army and starts fighting their assumptions?